right, we're back in the saddle today with the old Unreal Engine. Today we are going to talk about extending volumetric fog using a particle system, and I did a previous video on this, but I'm going to take it one step further and allow us to control the density of the fog by using a dynamic parameter within our particle emitter, which is then used in the material itself for the fog, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So the example that we're looking at right here, this is like a scene that I put together, and right now we're not seeing much. We don't see really any fog, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when I turn up the fog. Now I'm going to turn it up to be really kind of heavy at first. So we'll try this. So now you see fog is starting to appear using the volumetric fog and using a material which has its surface type set to volume. Now I can adjust this down and we'll go to a much lighter amount of fog. So right here you can see, well, that still looks pretty dense, doesn't it? Let's go down even a lot more. That's a little too much. All right, let's try this. Yeah, so here you can still see the fog coming in, definitely a lot lighter. Now I'm going to turn it up really high so you can kind of start to see what the particles look like themselves. Alright, so now you can see these particles are coming in, they're being created. If I back up and move up a bit here, you can kind of see that each one of these, you can see the center of a sphere, and the particle itself is coming in. The color is changing dynamically over time. It's going from a yellow to a greenish, and this is like extreme fog, right? It would never really get that high, but then if I tone it way down again, okay, that's still really high. Let me go down even farther. You can see this just starts having a nice subtle effect, and let me show you what I'm adjusting here and how this effect is being attained. Yeah, this is still really light. Really light. You can just barely see it. So if I go up a little bit more, a little bit more. Okay, so now let's get into how this is actually being achieved. So let me pull this into view. Here is my fog material, and this is the same one that I covered earlier in another video. I'll put a link back to that one. But I found this from Epic Games Evangelist, and I'm using it and extending it to my own liking. So you can go back and look at the other video I did, but the basic thing is we have a particle color, world position, particle radius. We're pumping these three things into a sphere mask, and we're multiplying the output of that by a density factor. And here you can see that I created a dynamic parameter over here under particles, dynamic parameter, and what this is providing you is the ability to name 4 parameters, so parameters 0, 1, 2, and 3, and then you have 4 float values that you can use. So in the default for the first value, I put it 0.05 or 5% density. And the higher that, or it's actually not 5%, but 0.05. So then you can take that density value, multiply it by the output of the sphere mask, This is the fade over life. Okay, so back to where I was. The dynamic parameter that's getting passed in from the particle system, we're going to apply the density. If you look at the dynamic parameter, it's got 4 nameable parameters. So I just named the first one density. The other 3 I left alone because I'm not using them anyway. I set a default value, and these are 4 floats that get passed in. So you can have in each dynamic parameter up to 4 different values being passed in, which is cool. So now in this material, the density is getting multiplied by the output of the sphere mask. It's getting applied into fade over life. So I am passing in the particle system alpha is it goes from 0 to 1 over the lifetime. Actually, I have it going from 0 to 1 to 0 over its lifetime. And then that will fade it in gradually and fade it out gradually. I pass that into the output of the extinction, and that's my material. Now, flipping over to the particle itself, I added a dynamic module to this, so that's under parameter dynamic. Right? If I look at this particular module, you have 4 different parameters, right? And that corresponds to the 4 different parameter values that you can have in your material. So for the very first one, I didn't even name it. I guess you could name it. You know, you don't have to name it, but if you want to, I believe you can. No, actually you can't name it. Oh, that's kind of interesting. So yeah, I just know that 0 translated to density over here. It's kind of odd that you can't name it. I would think that would be a useful thing. Anyway, I checked the check marks that says we're only going to set the value at the time it spawns. Otherwise, the value keeps getting updated for every frame, which I don't need. I'm not changing the value. And then this is the value that I was changing. So at a 0, if I'm at 0 for this value, density is going to be 0 here, gets multiplied, and it's going to make everything invisible. So then, if I go back here and look, if I just hide this, you see that there is no fog, right? Because everything, material is basically hiding the entire thing because I passed in a 0. Now, if I make this a tad bigger, come over here, and now we're going to increase this value. So let's increase it to 0.9. All of a sudden you can see I do start getting some. And if I get it really high, so like 100, now here we're back to seeing these large blobs. And, you know, obviously no one's going to use that, but I guess depending on the type of game you're making, that could be very useful. So that's it, guys. The dynamic parameter, super useful. I never understood what it was before, but now I actually figured out how to use it. And that makes me happy. I hope you learned something. Please subscribe and have a great day.